What is happening, beautiful people? Got a good one for you today. Her people contacted my people, and I was actually able to book my wife, Monica, for a conversation today. Really excited for you guys to hear her story and how it ties into my story and ultimately becomes our story. Now, you will notice that the audio gets a little wonky at times. It was an impromptu conversation that we decided to have in our living room, but we're doing the best we can, so shut up. I still love you, though. Another disclaimer. We do talk pretty candidly about our previous drug use and the shenanigans that ensued. I just want to point out that we are in no way glorifying the use of illegal drugs. It pretty much destroyed both of our lives for quite a long time, and it took us a lot longer to rebuild the lives that we currently live today. So don't do anything that we said we did in this podcast. Now, if you want to have a good laugh, hear a good story that ultimately ends in a happy ending, well then sit back, relax, don't forget to like, subscribe, download the podcast. However you hear this, I appreciate you. And welcome. My name is Randy, and this is a memoir from my broken brain.
This is weird.
It is.
This is really weird.
It's a little awkward, but you'll be all right. I promise.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So this is my wife, Monica. Monica, how are you doing today?
Yeah, I'm doing great.
Yeah.
It's a little hot in here, but other than that, I'm
It's
great.
just me.
Yeah. Yes. Yes, husband.
Yes. See, and that's called love, people. So Monica did agree to jump on mic and speak with me today. And it was pretty easy for her to say yes, but I can tell now, things it's pretty vulnerable. It's an interesting feeling to be exposed in this way on the mic, right? Let's check out some of that nervousness right now. Like, how are you feeling right now?
Good.
Good? Yeah?
Yeah.
Nervous about
Yeah,
anything?
I'm good. No.
Okay, awesome.
Let's go.
Okay, well, what is awesome about you besides marrying me?
Oh, I'm just awesome in general. Well, yeah, I guess I definitely qualify. I guess what makes us such a good match is a lot of what we have in common. Like, I know you haven't gotten too deep into a lot of your stuff, but I definitely am an addict slash alcoholic, and have been through some stuff, and kind of going backwards just slightly. What got me there was a bad breakup, and I didn't know how to handle it. And
How old are you?
16.
16.
I was 16
That's
years
funny
old.
because that lines up pretty close to where things spiked in my story too, is when I was 16 years old. So how did that all start?
Well, I mean, life was pretty good. I definitely do, have alcoholic parents, and, I had my own issues, and I always like to throw out there, like, my parents are the best parents. Like, I literally have the best parents in the world. But there just was some stuff growing up in the home. But other than that, things were amazing. And I, grew up in a nice area. And I, from the outside, you might think that I had it all. And I found this guy that was my first love. He was like my everything, we did we went to Hawaii at 16 years old, and we, spent every waking moment together. And, he was, and this was only like a year relationship, by the way.
Right.
But like, in that time,
I mean, that's everything. That's an eternity as a teenager.
There was just so much, that when it didn't work out, and some of my behaviors that I had learned in the past that I didn't even know I had started coming out in this relationship. And of course, didn't even realize that until I, got sober later. But, things just didn't work out, and I was devastated. And, I started partying a lot, and, kind of bringing all those negative behaviors into another relationship. and started, partying even more.
Are
And
we talking alcohol?
both alcohol, pills. Yeah, those were my first loves for sure. And then I guess I ran into you at a party that I
Yeah.
that was a
Yeah. So that is an interesting story. I had mentioned briefly that I wanted to bring Monica on to talk about, a lot about her and her struggle, and more specifically us and our struggle. So what I didn't get into was that we did meet at this house party, and I explained in the last episode that I was not the healthiest of people to begin with at this point in my life. I was drinking all the time. I was very outlandish. I was highly inappropriate. And I walk into this party, and the first thing I hear is that there's some crazy white girl in the back getting loud. Uh, and I was like, okay, that's precisely my speed. So I walk out, and there happens to be Monica, who is intoxicated and who
in a blackout.
in a blackout in a blackout, and she was essentially volunteering the fact that she had just gotten some work done in her chesticle region, and was like, who wants to see him? And my hand was the first one to be raised. I said, yes, I highly I support you. You're a strong, independent woman, and I believe that you know what's right for you, and I support your decisions.
Yes, you're always very supportive.
See, that's me. I'm a supportive egg, and I don't even know if that's a thing. But then there proceeds to be the flashing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Top did come up, and like I said, I alluded to the fact that I may or may not be Batman, but in ninja-like fashion, a camera was pulled out, and my smiling face with two thumbs up happened to get in the frame, and that is now the mother of my child and my loving wife.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it really was. It sounds pretty chaotic. It sounds crazy, but it's a situation like that really, there is something in that I'm like, okay, like this is my person, like it wasn't necessarily like, oh my God, I'm going to grow up and have the white picket fence and marry this woman and blah, blah, blah. But it was like, oh, I need to know more. I have to peek behind that curtain. I have to get in somehow. And we began a relationship. Shortly after, we had run into each other a couple different times through mutual acquaintances, all of which partying. And two of our closest friends at the time actually started dating each other. And that kind of led into the double date situation in which you and I started dating. And it was fun. It was casual. It was very, very cookie cutter, very routine. Right? We went to a movie. We went to the fair.
See, that's funny because I remember just getting drunk all the time and
Well, we did that
partying
too.
with you all the time and spending all of our last money on alcohol and buying dollar chicken nuggets.
Oh yeah.
From
Well,
Wendy's.
that came later for sure. But during the double date time, during the courtship, right, the courting period, is when we actually went out and did stuff. And this was another situation where we were two very broken people who happened to, for lack of a better term, get off on each other's chaos. And that's kind of what made us work for a long time. And I used work in a very loose,
Codependent.
okay, very codependent. I mean, I guess
Yeah,
should be fucking Dr. Phil over here.
that's what it
Very
was.
codependent. Yes, I am absolutely codependent as well. And yeah, and we were. It's like that Eminem song, right? It's what happens when a tornado meets a volcano. Like that. That was us. I mentioned that we were living super quickly, and it was hectic. And I haven't revealed this yet, but the nature of my addiction is I am actually a sex addict, and this courting period was actually very high stakes for me because I wanted to advance. I wanted to advance this relationship as fast as possible for one, the companionship that I was longing for, but also I read Monica as a hypersexual person like me, and I thought that that would be that would satisfy a lot of needs for me. To the point, you want to define addiction very early on in this relationship. I got a phone call from a friend that Monica was. They went to Supercross or whatever at Angel Stadium, and she was partying, needed a ride home, but she drove her car there. So I said, okay, cool. This is a good situation. Maybe we can party more. Maybe we can take our relationship to the next level. And I end up parking at a McDonald's outside of the stadium, picking her up from Angel Stadium in her car, driving her home, only to have my car towed the very next day. I never got that car back, and that was because of my poor decision making, in hopes that the commoditization aspect of our relationship at the time, like I had mentioned previously, would quote unquote pay off. So define addiction. But it was crazy. It was crazy. We did a lot of partying back then.
That's like literally an understatement.
Yeah, yeah, and I'm in the business of telling my story as bluntly as possible, and I in no way am pressuring anybody to do the same. But our partying did evolve. It did snowball, I guess I should say. It was no longer just drinking and weed, right? We got to a point where we did dabble in some
Oh yeah, we had our
methamphetamines,
meth
our
phase,
ecstasy
our
phase.
ecstasy phase. Yeah, yeah, we sure did. Totally that 24 hours that we
Yeah,
had together.
yeah. Oh, so all right. So here's a story time. 24 hours, and feel free to chime in here too, and add pieces of the story that I might not remember correctly, because it was a crazy 24 hours. Did it start off with the ecstasy?
Um,
That it had to have. Okay, sorry guys. So we acquired some ecstasy and decided to ingest said ecstasy. We then got a hotel room at a Motel 6 in the area. And I made a poor decision to get behind the wheel and drive while intoxicated on ecstasy, on MDMA, and hit a curb, popped a tire, ended up running into a parked semi, not hard, but from a parking lot. I thought the car was in park and it wasn't, just kind of rolled into it. And and it was crazy. It was crazy. So I damaged the car was the point of that story. We're in the parking lot of the Motel 6.
well, there was a guy before that was helping us,
We
and we told him we would smoke him out for helping us,
That's right.
and then we got back, and then we couldn't find what we needed to smoke him out with, right?
Right.
And then the cop showed up, and we were all really messed up, and you were sweating, and I was in and out, and he was just trying to be a good person and helping us out. And I guess somebody had called and said that there was something on the road. It was didn't look right, and so they came to check it out. And that was actually a time where the police actually, I actually have many times where, the police were pretty cool. But we didn't hide anything. They were talking to you. They're like, "Are you messed up?" And you're like, "Yeah, I
Yeah.
am, officer."
Yep. I was
Um,
yeah.
and
Granted, I told them that I was high on pot. I didn't say that I was on ecstasy. So that we were high on pot, and we actually had a room here, and that we were just gonna go upstairs and spend the night in the room. We weren't gonna bother nobody. And I believe you were on probation at the time.
Oh, I was on probation for a while,
Okay,
for
so
years.
that automatically allowed the cops to search the vehicle, and we honestly thought that we did not have anything on us. Um,
No, that come the next day? Didn't they find
oh,
it the next
sorry.
day?
Gosh, I'm really ruining the story. Sorry, guys. So yeah. So anyways, couldn't find anything, and the cop just kind of told us like, so what you're telling me right now is that no one's gonna get into this vehicle, and you're gonna go upstairs and sleep the rest of the night. And we were like, well, yeah. And he was like, no, no, no. What you're telling me is that you're gonna go into that hotel room and not leave until tomorrow. Is that correct? And we were like, yes, officer, that is correct. So we end up going up in the hotel room. We did end up smoking some guy out. Wasn't even the same guy.
I don't, to be
I
honest,
think it was
like I don't
somebody in
even
that
really
hotel who
remember
smelt the
like
weed.
what even happened after that. I just remember the next morning, in the process of them searching the car, like left my lights on and it killed my car battery. And it was super hot and we didn't have any gas, which was pretty normal. Like,
Yeah.
I think we were like constantly fishing for like just a few dollars to get from like one city to the next on a daily basis. It was pretty ridiculous. But
Yeah, we were probably the reason the AAA changed their fuel policy for when they would come out to calls, because Monica had AAA, and if you had AAA, they would come out, and if you ran out of gas, they would throw a gallon of gas in your car. And we utilized that more than once.
yeah, so I remember it being really, really hot, and we got in the car, and the car wouldn't start, and we needed a new battery, and it cost a ridiculous amount of money. And I remember you called your Aunt Diana in Alaska because we had burnt all of our other bridges. Nobody
Yeah.
else would give us money, and she was so kind and she helped us out. But then we had to figure out how to get more gas, and we had to figure out where to go and what to do because like we had nowhere. We didn't have money. We couldn't go to my house. We couldn't go, like we had nowhere to go. And one of our friends at the time said, hey, like if we can get to Corona, we can get gas money. And so we ended up trying to go get to Corona, and then something happened, if I remember correctly. We ended up across the street from my old house at Yorba Regional Park.
Yeah, we used to go there a lot. There was a local park that had a multiple parking lots, and that would kind of be our place. When you get into this cycle of just looking for your fix, getting your fix, running out of money, having to get money to get that next fix, to get money, to be broke. Once you sit into that spiral, you tend to just find places to kill time. And we spent a lot of hours just sitting in a car parked somewhere trying to figure out our next move, trying to figure out the next hustle. And this was the spot that we were sitting at. And so, okay, let me rewind. This fucking car that Monica had these fucking foil tint stars.
It was mirror tint, and it was pretty badass. And I wish I could have it again, but it's illegal. So
you're a fucking child.
It wasn't foil, it was a mirror, and it was awesome. Okay, continue.
So these mirror stars all over the fucking windows, right? We're sitting in the parking lot, and we are by definition shady looking. And cop drove by, used the tint as a reason to come talk to us.
Yes, and we were extremely not doing okay physically because it was really, really hot, and we didn't have anything to take the next day, so we're like detoxing at this point and not in a very good mood. And and then these cops roll up, and start giving us a hard time.
Cops roll up, start giving us a hard time, and of course here comes the anybody on probation and parole question. We're on probation. They're like, okay, we're gonna search the vehicle, and this vehicle was a mess, by the way. We had homes, but we were essentially living out of this car pretty much. So there's trash and clothes and stuff in the back seat, and the car was a mess. And we were like, fucking go ahead, search the car. Like, we don't have anything. If we fucking had it, we would have done those drugs, right? Like, if we would have, go ahead, please search, right? And so within 30 fucking seconds of the cop searching, he finds the packed pipe that we were looking
We
for the
literally
day
looked
before.
everywhere, and even the police officers
Even the police didn't
searched
find
and
it.
didn't find. I still to this day have no idea where they found it or how
What
they
I think
found it.
happened, now that I'm thinking about it with a sober mind, what I'm thinking happened was we packed it for the homeboy in the back seat who helped us out. He stashed it, and I guess he just stashed it real good. And so, yeah, so then the cops were like, pull that out. And my reaction was just like, oh, hey, we were looking for that, right? Like, it was a little bit of weed. And at the time, like, I didn't give a fuck about cops. Like, you know, I was too cool for cops. Cops were the enemy. You know, I was an outlaw. And that was my mindset. So, you know, talk whatever shit, be cool with it, right? Like, oh, yeah, I was looking for that kind of thing. So then they so then the police that come to us and they separate us, right? And they generally only do this with people when they find something, right? And what was the question that they asked you?
I think they asked me, like, is this my meth?
Yeah, that's what they asked me too. They said, whose meth is that in the car? And I laughed. I was like, meth? There's no fucking meth in the car.
Because at that time we weren't doing meth. Gotta
Right.
add that.
Yeah.
It wasn't at that time.
At that time, we weren't doing meth. And so we were baffled. Like, what are you talking about? and the cop said, whose meth is that? I was like, there's no meth in the car. You're fucking tripping. And he pulls out this little dime bag that had this white substance in it. And Monica just starts fucking laughing. Now, Monica, please explain to the listeners what one of your pastimes was while sitting for long hours in the passenger seat of a car.
Yeah, so we would regularly sit in a car, like you said, waiting for our next move, and I wasn't taking very good care of myself at the time, and my skin was really dry, and I always had like this pocket knife that I carried with me, and so kind of I'd just sit there, and we'd be listening to music in the car, and we would be with our friends, and we'd be getting drunk, whatever, and I would just kind of like shave the dry skin off of my legs, and for whatever reason thought it would
So
be a
nasty.
good idea to put it in a little drug bag and keep it in my glove compartment for safekeeping, I guess. I don't know what was going through my head, but I that's just what happened, and he totally found it, and they thought that it was old meth, is what they said.
What they said. And these
were
guys,
convinced.
they thought that they had the fucking bust of the century right here. They were just like, that just looks like old meth. And it was laughable. And they're like, oh, we're going to fucking take this shit to the lab and we're going to fucking test it. And when we do, you guys are going to jail, blah, 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 blah.
Like, please
right?
do.
You're like, please do, right? So we're sitting in this I'm sitting in the back of a cop car, detained. Monica's sitting probably on the front of the cop car with the police officer, while one of them takes this bag of quote unquote old meth to the lab. Now, I didn't get the joy of hearing the radio call because I was in the back of the car. Monica, when they tested the substance in question, what did that radio call sound like?
Oh man, I can't remember the exact words, but it was basically confirming that like we were right, and like it wasn't meth, and like the cop was just like smiled and was like, I've been doing this for a really long time and I've never heard of anything like this before. And I'm just like, I don't know.
Didn't they say at one point, like, do they want their bag of skin back? Like,
maybe. I don't know.
That's funny.
And
so
then,
that was, and this all is within a 24-hour span.
Yeah, this was a ridiculous 24 hours.
Acquired drugs, took drugs, wrecked a vehicle
multiple times,
got stopped by police, got let go by police, got assistance to help fix the vehicle, at least to get it running.
Oh, you know what? It actually was. The battery, I think that's how we ended up at the park. That's where they actually fixed the battery.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, so we had them come to the park, fix the battery, only to get stopped by the cops again, for them to find a bag of skin, tell us that it's meth, and then let us go with their head held down and tail between their legs, and us with this awesome story to tell, and even though it's funny to laugh about now,
well, there was one more part. when we were driving to Corona
Oh
on the
God.
freeway, and then because the car was wrecked, the front hood was bent in, it flew up on the freeway and completely smashed the windshield, deeming the car completely totaled. And so that happened. And by the grace of God, and I truly say that passionately, like by the grace of God, we were fine. All times that we wrecked that car, I mean, that would be the third time that something happened to that car within 24 hours. Like we're good. Nothing happened to us, you know? But yeah, that was, that was still to this day, the craziest 24 hours that has ever happened to me.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
it's nuts. It is absolutely bananas. One, that we're alive, and this was, now, for the sake of entertainment, this was just one of many stories that
Oh, we have tons of stories.
we have tons of stories,
that are
and
like
maybe
this.
we can do another episode where we just tell these stories. But I think that this just kind of gives an idea of where we were, and this was, like we had said, before we dabbled into methamphetamines. And at the time, I was spending every bit of money that I had from a job that I was barely working for hotel rooms. We were staying in a hotel because I had burnt the relationship with my parents. They knew that I was sick, and it was not the place for me. And of course, in my head, it's like, fuck them. This is their choice, right? Because that's what we did. And you were just along for the ride with me. You were able to go back home. Your parents knew that some shit was taking place, but I wasn't comfortable.
But I
Just
wanted to get out. I wanted to run. I did not want to be around people. I didn't want to be around anything. Like, I was very ashamed of who I was, who I had, like the person I had become. And you felt the same you felt the same way. And we bonded over our addiction for sure. Like, hardcore. Like, one of us should have
oh, for
died.
sure,
Like,
for sure. I mean, there was a night where we got so high on meth that we fully both believed that we had partied with these people who were staying in the hotel as well, that didn't fucking
oh
exist.
yeah, no.
And we manifested it together. Like, we both
We
were on the same
just
page.
would like come up with lines and we were just making shit up, and like, but then the other person would believe it. And so
Yeah.
I would say like, oh yeah, do you remember that guy? And you'd be like, yeah, was he with so and so? It was just crazy. It was chaotic. And that was the same night that, no, maybe it was the next morning, right? That you like
Yeah,
completely forgot who you were.
I believe that this is a symptom of overdose from meth, but I don't know. But we passed out. And when we woke up, I didn't know my name.
You literally didn't know who
I
you
didn't know my
were.
name for
And
for a while.
I thought you were joking.
Yeah.
And and then that's when we had to call a friend at the time, and she came over, and I'm like, dude, I'm gonna call your mom. Like, don't fuck around. Like, and like, you just couldn't, and you were looking at your ID and you were confused, and it was
Yeah.
like, and it took you a while to snap out of it. And you did.
Yeah.
um
Yeah. And of course, I had to play the lie, like, oh no, it's just because we ended up calling my mom at one point because I took some sleeping pills because I was like, I need to sleep. Haven't been up for too long. We went to the doctor to get sleeping pills, and then my mom came to check on me, and it was at this point that, like, we knew things were rough, and I ended up hiding at your house for a while, living there, pretending I would leave in the morning to go to work, and then after your parents left for work, I would come back to the house and
oh
hang
yeah,
out with you
we
all
did
day.
that for a really long time.
Yeah,
And got
and
away
then
with it too.
your parents would go to bed. And I just wouldn't leave, and so they just thought I was coming. Well, okay, we later found out that they knew that I was living there, and they essentially just said, "Look, stop fucking hiding the kid." Like,
They didn't know the entire time, but they did end up finding out. Yes. And then you did live with us.
yeah. And then it was actually during this time that we began conversations with family in Alaska. And
Yeah, it was a really crazy point. That's when I was getting into a lot of trouble, and I was supposed to have court. to face a lot of my charges. And I was really scared at the time and a natural runner. And this was like the perfect door for me to run through. And I'll let you.
Yeah. So I know I touched on this before, but we ended up just packing up, and like within just like a week's time, we ended up packing up and just taking off to Alaska.
Yeah, we left on my court date. I was
Yeah.
supposed to have court that day, and I said, peace out.
Yeah. And if you want to talk about fear, if you really want to talk about fear, try going through LAX security with a known fugitive. Well, not a known fugitive, but with someone who missed their court date. There was an active warrant out for her.
And they stopped you, right? Like they didn't even
Yep,
stop
they
me.
didn't stop. They didn't stop Monica. They stopped me. Yeah, so we get to Alaska, and I know Alaska from my point of view, right? But like, what was going on through your head going to a new place with new people?
Yeah, I had friends even before going, try to talk me out of it because they're like, what are you doing? Like, why are you just picking up and leaving and going to Alaska? Especially because we as a couple were not the favorite. We were very destructive together. We were very secretive. We were really shady. We did a lot of things that a lot of people couldn't believe what we were saying. We just like weren't.
Borrowed a lot of money. We burned a lot of bridges.
Did
up
yeah.
every bit of favor that we could find.
We did, and so I had some people try to talk me out of it, but in my mind, all I wanted to do was run. And I wasn't really thinking about anything else, to be honest. It was a really selfish decision. I wasn't, at the time, my parents had, bailed me out of jail and they had, put their house down. And had even, I didn't care about that either, and it later came out that it was an issue because my dad got, promoted and he was going to transfer, and they couldn't sell the house, because of, what had happened. But I just did not care. Nobody but myself was in mind, but I was happy to be there. When we got there, I felt free for a second. We did a lot of partying right when we got there until I found out I was pregnant.
Yes. Yeah. And that was kind of an interesting thing too, because you had thought you were pregnant at first when we got up there, and I got really excited, and then you took the first test and it came back negative. Yeah. And I wanted to will that into a positive, but it turns out that God did that for us because you were actually pregnant. It just didn't show up on a test until like a week or two later.
Yeah, you had always wanted kids. I didn't.
Always.
That was never. I'm so grateful that we have our daughter now. But you definitely you wanted to fill that hole with a child.
Yeah.
Which.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Definitely. And I think that I've done a lot of reflecting and a lot of looking into why that is, because I mean, even back when I was a teenager, like if it was in the cards for me to be a young parent, like that's what I wanted. Like I wanted a kid when I was like 17, 18 years old, which is fucking stupid.
21.
Right? I was 21 when we found out that you were pregnant. I think I was 22, you were 21 when she was actually born. So yeah, so we both got jobs up there. I got promoted pretty quickly in the retail space, number one employee at Hot Topic. What's up? And you actually had a really interesting job.
I loved my job.
Yeah, what were you doing up there?
I worked at VCA, so Alaska Pet Care, and it was a phenomenal job. I had always wanted to work with animals, and I loved it. Loved it. It was so sad when we left to have to quit that job.
Yeah, definitely. And we made the decision together to come back to California, where there was more family, where, we had spent about a year away, a little less than a year, science. And we kind of were coming back. People started missing us. Well, some people, my parents, started missing us. Your parents started missing us a little, and we came back when you were really pregnant, right?
Well, my parents too. I mean, they were on me all the time. They were like, "Please, can you come back?" Um, and that was a thing too. Turn yourself in. They ended up being able to release the house. So I guess bounty hunters were like after me for a couple days, and they found me. And since Alaska's a non-extraditable state, they were able to say that they technically, like booked and released me, and my parents were able to sell their house and move. However, they were really on me for coming back and taking care of what I need to do, especially because we were having a kid too. There was a lot of pieces. It was more than just like, oh, we want to come back for the support. That was a big piece, but
Well, to be
there
honest,
was
I
a
think a
lot
lot
of
of it
chaos
was,
too.
yeah, if we had to really make the decision that if we were going to have the baby up there, chances are we would have stayed up there forever, or at least for a long, long time. And doing what we do best at the time, we turned our relationships up there pretty sour too.
Pretty
And
quickly.
we pretty
Yeah.
quickly, and
Burned those bridges.
we we burnt those bridges, you know.
Ended up in a hotel room
And
again.
yep, yeah, ended up in
In
a hotel room again.
Alaska.
That was only for like a night
I
though,
mean, but it
but
happened. It's
it
our
happened. And then
pattern.
so I did mention we do have Alaska stories. There's a lot of fun situations that took place up in Alaska, and then the drive home from Alaska. But we'll move this story along a little bit here. We get back to California, and we start actually living with my grandparents. We have the baby, and things just started getting a little bit worse.
Heavier into my pill addiction because I had a C-section and I couldn't, like, my tolerance I couldn't handle it. And so I got back into that. And well, I think I was on house arrest for 60 days. So you would
Yeah, that was
you
part
would
of
go get
taking
the
care of
pills
it.
for me because I couldn't leave.
Yeah, and me being codependent, right?
Yeah.
Codependent me. The last thing that I would ever want would be for you to not like me, for you to not love me anymore, for you to, even for, sorry for, anybody this might come across as offensive, but I didn't want the well to run dry, so to speak. And we were at a point in our relationship to where there was zero intimacy. Anyways, we were both kind of just going through the motions, trying to stay alive, using each
Survival.
other for
Straight
survival.
There was no.
There was love, but we couldn't really feel it, and we couldn't really show it. It just, we were incapable. We were incapable. We were broken human beings, and all we could do was what we could to survive.
Oh, yeah. I was somewhere else. I wasn't capable of loving anybody at that time, including myself.
Yeah. It did end up getting to a point where we left my grandparents, and we got into a place. It was very short lived, and it was a place that we had to actively fuck this up. We got hooked up. We got hooked up for letting us move in there. The landlord, the property manager, who wasn't the owner, but the property manager, was really cool, and she basically furnished our apartment for super cheap because she was getting new furniture. So we were able to use tax money and pay her like $1,000 to get 2 couches, a coffee table, a flat screen TV, an entertainment center, and and she would be cool with us, just cool with us, right? We burnt that bridge, obviously, because we used our money for shit. We used our money for McDonald's and pot at the time.
Yeah, we didn't. And I was taking a lot of the money without you knowing, and buying pills, and then coming up with bullshit or getting my parents to kind of make up for whatever it was, and then I'd be telling my parents bullshit, and like, oh my gosh, we're gonna get evicted, and they felt bad because of Kaylin. They didn't want our daughter to be on the street. Yeah, so.
And it was around this time our downgrade just continues, right? We ended up moving into a little back house for a little while that wasn't even, it was a single bedroom with a bathroom in it, and it was a back house. Struggled to pay rent there until we ended up just bouncing from there. And
it wasn't for lack of money either. Like, I always have to throw that out there. Like, we always you always made the money. But
I was really good at hustling. No matter what, I was always, even as a kid, it was one of the skills I had. hey, can I borrow a dime? Can I borrow a dime? I'm a dime away from lunch, you know? And then at the end of the day, I got $15 and me and my homies go to Del Taco. You know, like I've always had a mindset for getting the paper. The paper wasn't an issue. Uh, Spending was the issue. And we were very irresponsible. Of course, we were still both really sick. At this point, we're basically left with living in a hotel. You know, that little back house was the last actual home that we had for a very long time. Yeah, and at the hotel, I was no longer working, and Monica wasn't working, and we had to resort to some extreme measures to make that money, right? Um, and we got Monica got a job that was very unhealthy for her addiction, right? And how did that's really when things started getting super dark for you, right?
Yeah. Um, it was a very, very, very dark time for me to have to do what I was doing at the time. It was just really demoralizing as a person, and in order to even think about doing it, had to be messed up. And I remember that's when, like, especially like my drunk driving kicked in. I would be like leaving work and I would be getting home and I would have no idea how I'd get home. And sometimes it would be like 2 o'clock in the morning, and sometimes it'd be 4 o'clock in the morning, and I would like have no recollection of what was even happening. And like I mean, if I didn't already hate myself, that's when I truly like I couldn't. It was hard. It was so hard to be around people, to be around you guys, to do anything. But I was not very employable either, and I backed myself into a corner and made myself believe that there were only certain options. And
Yeah, when
unfortunately,
we get this deep in our addictions, it's almost like we only deserve. You know, we feel like we're getting what we deserve and we don't deserve anything more. And it was during this time too that my addiction to pornography was really taking off because I was home by myself, upset with the situation, upset with what I knew that the woman I love was having to subject herself to just so we can pay the hotel room. Things went from bad to worse from there. I know Monica touched on taking money out of the kitty before, and she took a lot of money out of the kitty this time. And it ended up resulting in an altercation where both of us were at fault for uh, becoming physical with each other. Police were called, and when the police came, the option was we both go to jail or one of us goes to jail, and we opted. I said no. We're take me, right? And so I I went to jail for the for the altercation. Um, the first time, right? We can fast forward living more in hotels. I end up getting out, and there's a mandatory restraining order on the situation. Obviously, Monica and I can't stay away from each other because we love each other so much. And
yeah,
and
yep,
uh,
that's
and
what it
long
was.
story short, I ended up getting caught being around her again, and that's when I did my longer bid in county. And it was during this time that I would say our relationship hit one of its all-time lows.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I was already completely unfit because, like, I mean, we tell this story, but all of this because we had Kaylin shortly after we came back. So, like, rewind all of this stuff of like going to hotels and losing our place and me spending all of the money on, drugs and us getting screwed up all the time. This is while having our daughter, so I was already completely unfit to be a mother. And when that had happened, your mom had offered to, watch Kaylin and help out with Kaylin, and that was like my green light. And like then, like that was an excuse for me to completely lose myself. I didn't have any more strings attached. I could like go buck wild, and you were, sitting in there, waiting for me, hoping I would be, loving and faithful, and then I was just like new chapter in my life. Like open, I ran to Corona. I started, hanging out with some really bad people and did some, just did the crazy things that you do when you're on meth. And, won't get into all of that because we don't have the time for that. But eventually I did so much meth that I went into a meth psychosis, and I didn't know what was real and what wasn't. And that's a huge, huge, huge part of my story. If anybody's ever heard of the Truman Show, like the movie, that was my reality during that time. Which was interesting because right before that happened, like I was in a scary place where, I thought that I was gonna die and everybody was gonna kill me, and I, saw knives on everybody, and I saw, like, I would hear trash,
Like knives, like they have
like,
fingers, like
no,
finger
like
knives.
not, no, like, well, I said I hung around some like bad people who had, stuff on them all the time, and every time they would grab their pocket, they would grab, like, do something, I was like, oh my god, like this is it, like this is when I'm gonna die. Like I would hear trash bags, and I'm like, okay, they're getting ready to, like, chop me up and, like, like dispose of me. And then something happened where I, had this experience where I was in the Truman Show, and where I started hearing, people outside talking about me, and I was convinced that the TV was talking about me. And there was this commercial that came on about this reality show that was like, about these average Joes, like being diamonds in the rough. And for whatever reason, that, like, that spoke to me, and I started tripping. Like I started, like, listening to music, and I'd be like, dude, I'm feeling insane, like, and then the song, like, insane in the membrane, insane in the brain, and I, like, tripped out, and I was like, something's going on, it's not just in my head. Like I started really, like, hallucinating, and I started just having this actually really positive response to this meth psychosis, which, I'm really, really grateful for, but I'm also terrified at the same time. I truly believe it's one of the reasons why I've kept my sobriety for so long, because I just don't know if I'll ever come back from something like that. But it did have the power to get me sober, and I was convinced that, like, I would hear friends' voices, I would hear your voice, I would hear my family's voice, and, like, you were the center of a lot of my hallucinations. Like I was convinced that, like, you were running a lot of, like, what was going on. Like you knew everything already, that everybody had known everything about
I
me
was controlling the
already.
simulation.
Yeah, it was like everybody, like everything that I had ever hid, every deep dark secret, anything that I thought that I was hiding, had finally, like, to me, it was like a light bulb, like, oh, they know I wasn't hiding anything. And I, ended up going to my first meeting.
How
And
long? How long were you uh, away? I know that we had separated when I was in jail. How long were you away before you had this experience?
a few months, maybe 4 months, 4 to 6 months. I don't know. How long was it? Because my timeline's off.
Oh, okay. You're asking
I'm
me?
asking you.
Yeah,
Like,
it was over a year.
it was okay.
Yeah, it was
See,
over a
like,
year.
I'm really bad with, like, I tell people all the time, I'm like, I have no concept of time. Like back then, I literally got to a place where, like, I'm convinced that, like, 80% of, like, what happened in my life, like, I don't remember correctly, like, even when it came to my 2 DUIs that I got within 12 days of each other, like, I didn't even find that out until way later in my sobriety, you know. So anyways,
Yeah, so you went to your first meeting.
I went to my first meeting, where I was encouraged to share about what I was going through at the time, and I had never done anything like that before. And I literally was convinced that everybody knew everything anyways. So I spilled whatever I could in that 5 minutes that they allotted me, and I shared every dark secret that I
So this was like
had.
right after the
This
psychosis,
was
or
this
in
was
the midst
during
of
my
it.
psychosis. My psychosis lasted even, like, close to a year, even in sobriety, and I'm sure you remember because I thought that I was pregnant when I wasn't, and was not all there, and I did a lot of soul searching, but
You
um
worship Korean Jesus.
I
Let's not
did.
forget about
I
that.
did. Yes. But it got me sober, and by the grace of God, I've stayed sober, and relapse is not a part of my story. Um, you
How long have
know,
you been sober?
it'll on the 28th of June, I'll have 8 years. Yes, I'm really proud of that. But I have, I've always done everything that was suggested of me, but like I said, I do feel like it took so long for the voices to leave, and I was really afraid to tell people. Like once I started to realize that this isn't real, I was really afraid to have that conversation with people because I thought I was just crazy. But I had such a positive experience that I didn't want to let it go. It was really inspirational. I totally, in my heart of hearts, believe it was God driven and, whatnot. And I've just grown since.
So after you came back, you got some sobriety under your belt. Um, you then made contact with me,
Yeah.
and I
Yeah.
was not receptive. I was not receptive
No.
at first, and I treated you like shit.
Rightfully
I
so.
treated I maybe not. I mean, the anger may have been justified, but I don't feel like my behavior is condonable. I did treat you like shit. I had mentioned that I had treated, my biological father like shit for the same way. I felt like you had a debt to pay me. And and our first couple conversations were quite hostile by my part. I wanted nothing to do with it. I was hurt. I was in a lot of pain, and I was delving deeper and deeper into my own addiction. I was by myself. And when I say by myself, that doesn't mean I was on an island. I had tons of support. I had tons of love, but I was essentially a single father for that year, and all while trying to manage my own addiction, trying to get back on my feet after getting out of jail from making money, getting back to work, trying to live this quote unquote normal life while still trying to feed that addict who's just been deep inside of me doing push-ups the whole time. And yeah, I was not very receptive, but what I did was I kind of laid it out as an ultimatum, kind of, right? You wanted to re-enter into the realm of motherhood, and I felt that it was only fair if you had shown me that you can put together the same amount of time sober as you were away. We would then, you know, start working forward. And in my head at the time, it was, I'll let you be involved in our daughter's life. Now,
Barely.
what?
I should say, I barely. I want to add barely.
Barely what?
Was I involved in her life?
Oh, yeah.
Rightfully so.
No,
I'm
no, no.
grateful
But
that it
I'm
worked
saying
out
like
that way.
those were the steps that I had felt were the law I needed to lay. Right now, obviously, I didn't stick to that as firmly as I wanted to. And when you were putting together some time, you were doing great in your sobriety. You started working again, a real job, like a normal job. And what had happened is I was so broken, and I was like, the thought of like just being alone any longer, I couldn't do it. And you and I started talking a little more closely. We were a little more cordial with our conversations,
It took
and
a lot of work on my part. I have to add, because I had no idea about your addiction at this point. I mean, you always joked about, or I guess maybe it wasn't joking, but you were always telling me like, yeah, like I'm addicted to porn. I'm a sex addict, and I didn't, not understanding or knowing what I know now. I did not. I mean, that
well,
wasn't
and
serious.
and
So
even
I
then,
didn't like.
I didn't know what that really was. I thought that was just the code word for like I'm just a hypersexual person. Until like it ended up becoming something that was ultimately bringing me down and tearing me down, ripping me apart limb from limb. And the fact that I'm codependent and that I did love you, I never stopped loving you. Then the addict in me saw this as an opportunity to fill the hole that had been ripped out of me. And And once again, you being sober, you were working on some of the guilt you felt, right? And you gave me way more than I deserved, especially at
Well, I
first.
thought you were an angel. I was like, I'm never going to be able to compensate for what I did to you because I mean, I was unfaithful and I cheated and lied and I did a lot of things that I did regret for a really long time. It took me a long time to heal from.
And you tried,
And I
and
really,
I
and I
milked it.
did.
I
And
milked it dry.
I like threw myself at you in so many ways. I mean, like love songs every day and text messages, and there was even a part of my sobriety where I like you were what was keeping me sober, like that's what I needed to keep me sober. Like I was going to win you back, and it didn't work until of course I had to truly be okay and comfortable letting go, and then that's when
How did you get
the
to that point?
shift.
Because what had happened, for those listening who don't know, is it did get to a point where I was not meeting you halfway in our quote unquote relationship, and you were giving me way more than I was willing to give you, because at the time I was having my cake and eating it too, and I was, just living very unhealthily, and I was not giving you what you deserved or meeting you halfway with what you were giving me. And you got to a point where you laid it out for me and you said, "Look, I'm never going to stop loving you, but I'm not going to keep chasing you like this. Like we need to seriously talk about what's going on here." Right? How did you get to that point? What helped you get there? Because what that reads like to me is that you had an epiphany of your own value. You realized how special you are and realized that you were not being treated as such.
Yeah, well, I mean, that comes with day after day working on yourself and really working through the wreckage and really working on my feelings. And really, like, once I was able to get through the guilt and the shame of what I had did, and I started to prove to myself with sobriety and getting a job and keeping friendships and being a decent person, I started to realize that maybe I wasn't the piece of shit that I thought I was. And then I started to realize too that like maybe me and you were not meant to be. And I'm a very big believer of like what's meant to be will be. And if that door shuts, then it was for a reason and another door will open. And I came to a place in my recovery where I was able to finally let go and accept that. And it took a while because my will wanted you back right away. My will wanted, but it wasn't time yet. Like I had a lot of work to do on myself in order to that. And then, of course, as soon as that happened, that's when that shift changed. And then I started, I think I even dated for a second, outside of you. And that was very short lived, but then we did start to slowly come together. And it was just totally not of my own making. I don't like that's my higher power
Yeah.
doing.
Yeah. And a lot of it too was I had realized that I was objectifying you. I was treating you as something that was giving me something that I needed, and that's when I realized that I was about to lose you, and then I realized like, okay, I've already lost you once. Like even through all this shit, we gave each other a million reasons to leave and to end
Oh,
it.
yeah.
And I couldn't not have you around. I needed you in my life, and I didn't know why. I didn't know why, because on paper, like I should have let you go. You should have let me go. That's on paper. But like you said, everything happens for a reason, and higher, there were forces greater than us at play here for sure. So we ended up getting closer over time. We began the dating process over again. Yeah, we started brand new. We were dating, and fast forward, we ended up getting a place together and moving in. And it was awkward at first for me because I knew that I wasn't fully ready to be the man that you thought I was and that you deserved to have.
Yeah, I was totally fooled
Yeah.
because I was like ready. I was like, I thought that you were somebody completely different.
Yep.
And, but we'll get there.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah. And so, I was working. I continued to work. Monica continued to work. And things just kind of kept going. At the time, your work schedule played really well into my addiction schedule. because I would work during the day, you would work at night, which means, child rearing at home. So, feeding our daughter, getting her bathed, getting her ready for bed, and then getting ready for school in the morning, that type of thing. Those are the things that I actually do well. If we're talking about high functioning addiction, and I know that some people listening might kind of cringe at the fact like, oh, well, it's not like a chemical dependency. Well, it can be debilitating, and it was absolutely. And that was what I did well, right? Parenting is one of the things that I did well, at least for the most part, until I didn't, right? Until, it was, okay, kids in bed, now it's time to what I would call act out sexually. So be engulfing in pornography or engaging in inappropriate conversations with strangers online, right? It was all it was the time, right? I was by myself at night, and then you would come home, I would already be asleep, and we would just start that cycle over. We never really saw each other except for the weekends, and even then I knew I was living a double life, and you were giving me all of you. And I'm pretty sure, I mean, I don't want to speak for you, but I would have to assume that over time, this started becoming more and more apparent that just something wasn't right. Like,
Oh yeah. I had multiple feelings, but I had my blinders on for a long time too. Like I had this image of what I wanted you to be and who I thought you were, and in my head, even though when we were really toxic together, you were still always super faithful to me and super loving, and you never gave up on me, and you were obsessed with me, and I loved it. I loved all of it, and so in my head, I never even thought twice about you being any or being capable of doing anything different. And so that, yeah.
yeah. And so this all came to a head when I went on a trip with some family, and there was someone on this trip whom Monica was suspicious of me spending time with. Now, the funny thing about this is that this situation never transpired in the way that, Monica thought that it would, or even that, I had thought it could have. It never did. But it was enough to when I got home, it lit an ignition. And that ignition uh, brought forth a line of questioning, and then brought forth the uncovering of this secret life that I was living through means of social media accounts and text message histories and things like that. And all of my shit just came to the surface.
Oh yeah, we were engaged.
We were engaged.
We can't.
Oh yeah, we can't
forget that part.
Oh yeah. So yeah,
We were
sorry, not
engaged
only
at
were
this
we
time.
engaged, but we had a wedding date set. We had a wedding date set.
We had like half of it planned.
We had half of the wedding planned.
Mm-hmm.
You
Yeah.
know, and all of this came to the surface, and it broke us both. It broke us both. And I had mentioned before, you kicked me out for good reason, and canceled the wedding. And I had to go with my tail between my legs back to my parents' house and say, hey, I fucked up. Like, this is what happened. Can I crash here? And I thought that was it. I thought it was over. I thought that there was no coming back from this. And after a little bit of time, Monica agreed to talk to me, and you basically sat me down, and you were like, "Look, fucker, like, you're fucking broken. There's something fucking off with you. I knew it was always something, And it is important to note too that even during Monica's sobriety, I had continued drinking pretty heavily.
Oh yes, that was a problem too.
Yeah, it wasn't that I was drinking every night, but I would go out on weekends and I would get fucking hammered because I'm not the one with the drinking problem, So that was a mindset I had, and so I was just, I would get home, and whenever the fuck I wanted, I was out whenever I wanted. I wouldn't come home when I said I was gonna come home, and I still
tracking you down at 3:00 in the morning, and couldn't get a hold of you.
Yeah, and it got to the point where, like I said, in my head, I was like, well, fuck it, like, I'm still up 1 in the game, right? Like, I'm still up 1.
And there was a part of me that thought you were too. Like I said, I was never in a place where I thought that that things could ever break even because of what I had done to you.
So we had that conversation in the car, and you're like, look, I know what you're going through on an addiction side, but it's up to you to walk through the door. You know that there are people that you can talk to and places that you can go to address these addictive behaviors. And I took that. I took that, and it was the life raft. It was the rope that I had spoken about previously that I needed to cling on to, because what I didn't tell people was that my pain behind the scenes, on the surface, I looked like I was just doing what I wanted, having the time of my life. I had mentioned having my cake and eating it too, but really what was happening was I was in so much pain that I needed to up the ante every time in order to numb that pain. And it had gotten to a point where what I was doing wasn't even fun anymore. It wasn't fixing the pain. It was only making it worse. And, I had gotten to a point where I had seriously considered, punching my ticket, just clocking out on the whole thing, on life, on my existence. And had this trip, and then this discovery, and then this guidance of pointing me to what ultimately saved my life, we wouldn't be sitting here talking today. I wouldn't have a story to tell, and I don't think I've ever truly thanked you enough, and I don't think I could ever thank you enough for that. You basically led me to water, but you were like, look, fool, you're the one that has to fucking drink. And I did. I then learned how to live a life worth living in a spiritual way. And now I devote every day to just bettering myself a little bit each day, right? A little bit. And it's not always pretty. We're both human.
No, it took a lot of time for us to heal, from all of that. It's not easy to have to do what we did and then to have to start over again.
Yeah.
We've started over how many times now?
Yeah. But what's funny is, like, now I had just said that I'd always felt like I was up one. Now Monica was like,
oh, I was stoked.
Like,
I was like,
we're even, bitch.
Even, bitch.
Like, don't even fucking.
Like, I was in so much pain. I have never felt something so painful before. I will just be so honest, and I've gone through a lot of painful stuff, and that was by far the most painful thing I've ever gone through, because I was sober and I could actually feel. I'm sure there's been other things that would be, cause a lot of pain, but I wasn't actually feeling it. This is what I was feeling, and it hurt. And it took a lot of, but it was like, but at the same time, I was like, fucking A.
Yeah.
Like,
now we're even.
He can't say shit to me anymore because he's just as bad as I was. And there was a part of me that was like, fuck yeah, maybe we have a chance. And I was actually really shocked when you decided to get help, because I didn't take you as the type to get help, because you always talked a little bit of shit on my program, and I never thought that you would be willing to do what you needed to do and what I needed to do. And I am so blessed to have you as a partner, because you run a program like I run a program, and I know a lot of people who don't run programs the way that I, that works, that is solid, that is consistent, that is like never giving up, and transparent, and just honest, and and pure, and like higher power driven, and whatever and our higher powers have even look different at times, but it's just like so magical, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like I guess everything does happen for a reason.
That's the only word for it. And this isn't like it was just I always like to say it wasn't just pizzas and blowjobs, right? But it wasn't all flowers and rainbows. Well,
no.
It wasn't all flowers and rainbows the whole time. We're still human.
No.
We're still recovering addicts, and you can be a little asshole sometimes.
Oh, for sure. Absolutely.
I could be an asshole
that's
too.
like my
are,
default mode. I have to work on a daily basis to keep that in check.
But it was, we've been talking for an hour about how things happen for a reason, and we truly believe that these paths were set forth, for us, set for us to walk. We don't get forced to walk them, but the guardrails are there. And some would say that the pain that you had to go through in order to get the help that you needed to become able to empathize and help the pain that I was going through is the only reason that this is all here today. Like that pain is ours, and that pain has led us here for a reason, right? I think that you being able to you learning how to better equip your pain as a tool for propulsion as opposed to a setback is the only reason why we're sitting here talking. Because if you didn't know what that was like, if you didn't know how you felt, if you didn't know how I felt during all this, that empathy wouldn't have, there'd be no reason, right?
Yeah, it's amazing how things come full circle and how everything happened exactly the way that it was supposed to. And that, like, when I look back on things and look on, like, my decisions and what I've done, and whether it's in our relationship or to myself or whatever, it's like I wouldn't change anything because, like, it's brought me to this exact moment. And in our relationship, like, it's just mind blowing that, like, everything was so timed out perfectly, because even down to when this stuff happened, because if I didn't have the time and sobriety, if I didn't have the tools that I had, if I didn't have anything like that, and I had heard, and you're coming out, what happened, what do you guys call it? It's
Discovery.
There you go. If that would have happened any sooner, I would have followed all of my same patterns that I would have followed before, because heartbreak was my number one offender. And that did something really special for me. I was able to finally conquer, like, my biggest demon, and that was, like, I could get through anything, like, that was, like, my kryptonite. But if it would have happened sooner, like, I could have probably relapsed over it.
Yeah, and here's the thing too, and here's something that I talk about quite often, is that I had always told myself too that all this shit, once we get married, it's over. Like, it's done. I'm gonna stop living this way. I'm gonna stop doing these things. And looking back on it now, there was no way I would have ever stopped. And I'm just so grateful that all of this happened before the wedding, before we got married.
Oh yeah, me too. Yeah,
because it really gave us the time for me to work on myself, to get to a point to where we can work on our relationship together. And it still is a daily struggle. We're still us.
Yeah.
But I like to say that we are both shattered people, but our jagged edges fit together like a puzzle. And you are the matching crazy to my crazy. There's a lot that people don't know about us. There's a lot that people don't know about the things we've been through, and that's that's the real definition of a ride or die right there, for us to both be sitting here right now talking about this with a smile on our face, grateful for the pain, and it's something special, man. It's something really special. And after a couple years of some work and some climbing out of some holes for the two of us, and rebuilding our relationship and regaining that trust and working together to becoming better people individually, and then becoming a better team together, then what happened? We finally got married.
We did. Right. And it was such a trip, because I had people ask me, like, getting married for you guys isn't really going to be that big of a deal, right? Because you guys have been together for so long. You've known each other for so long, and you've, been living together for so long, like, and because, yeah, if you look at the timeline, it's about, 11, 12 years once we actually, like, got married. And I was like, no, man, like, this is a completely different version of our relationship, one where we are truly honest with each other, and we know how to identify with our feelings, and we work together as a team, and we know we don't argue, and we don't like we work our differences out, and we communicate, and like it's based on love, and like and purity. Like, I love that word. It's just pure. And so, no, it wasn't just us getting married. It was so, like, making that commitment to you was something on a whole nother level that I can't even, like, put into
Yeah.
words.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And at the time of recording this, and by the time it actually comes out, it'll probably be a lot closer, but in about a week from now, we will actually be celebrating our 1-year anniversary.
June 9th.
June 9th. We've been together for like
Ever.
13 years, but we're finally...
Minus that, like, break in between, yes. But, I mean, overall, yeah.
Yeah, and we've made it. We made it here. I mean, and look, I'm never going to pick up my dirty clothes from the floor.
Oh my gosh.
You're never going to
Drives me
put the
crazy,
dog
eh?
leash or your keys where they're supposed to go. We're going to do things that piss each other off, but we've learned to work through these things as a team, and to understand, to pick our battles, right? We know how far we've come, and I'm fine. I'm happy with the things about you that piss me off now, as opposed to the things about you that pissed me off before.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, well, this is what marriage is, and we've literally every single day we have not only worked on ourselves, we've worked on our relationship, and it has been work. I mean, when all this stuff happened, there was so much crying, and the trust wasn't there, and we didn't go over any of that in this because there's no need to, but it's always going to be work. But I do believe with both of us having the program that we have, like, we could do anything, and that's absolutely the most magical thing that I could ever ask for. Like, that's why I live.
We're
today.
Finally now the best current versions of ourselves to be the best versions for each other, and we're not perfect, and there's still room to grow, and this is going to be a challenge. It's going to be work, and there's no one on this planet that I'd rather work this hard for and with than you. Samesies. Yeah. So, I mean, it was nice to be able to get this out there, and let people hear a little bit more about not only me, but to hear from you, and to hear about us, to show people that true love is possible to find, no matter how broken you think you are. But it also does require time, work, and there's a lot of growing pains involved. How do you? Let me ask this: What do you do for a living now?
I am case manager / counselor for a counseling center.
Like high school kids getting into college?
Drugs and alcohol. Mm-hmm.
Nice.
Mental health.
So something right up your alley.
Oh yeah, if anything would have went any differently, I would have never found my passion, and this is my passion. So I'm grateful for my story. I'm grateful for our story. It's my biggest asset in my profession is my experience.
Definitely. Well, awesome. Well, thank you for being here with me today. I do have one last question for you. Okay. It's gonna be kind of cliche, but I want to pick your brain a little. If you can go back 20 years, and knowing what you know now, and you can tell 20-year younger you one thing, what would it be?
Don't get caught. Just kidding. I don't know. Like I said, I am a firm believer as everything happens for a reason. If I were to go back and say anything to my younger self, I think that would have changed the timeline of events.
Oh, what are you, the Flash now?
Well,
This is a Flashpoint paradox.
That's like what I'm thinking of.
Get the fuck out of here.
But no, for real, like I'm grateful for this wisdom, and that's not something that could just be told to somebody. It's something that like I had to experience myself. And so even if I went back and I told my younger self anything, chances are I would have listened to it anyways and still would have had to have the experience and, still end up wherever, I would have ended up depending on what I told my younger self. But see, I complicate things.
How about this? You want to get really complicated for a second? Okay, imagine that you're 20 years older.
Yeah.
And you came back to this moment. What would 20-year older Monica tell you today?
Don't worry about stupid shit. It doesn't matter. Like that's a cycle of mine. I, spin over things and worry about things when if I just do what I'm supposed to do, things have a way of working themselves out. If I just constantly stay in today, which is a practice that I constantly have to do and it doesn't go perfectly every day. But I think that would probably like I could totally see myself in 20 years being like, why would you even care about, why do you even worry about that? I mean, I do that like for stuff like a week ago. Like, why do you spend so much time thinking about that?
See, and the reason why I like to ask people that question is because generally if it's advice that I'm giving to myself from someone who is presumably wiser than the version of me now, maybe I should listen. So maybe you should, chill the fuck out like you just said. Don't take things so seriously.
I've gotten better.
I thought you were gonna say, I would tell people, hey, make sure you subscribe and like the podcast and download it.
Yes, that's just kidding.
Okay.
That's what I really.
So there's the call to
say.
action, guys. So if go ahead and give this a like, subscribe wherever you're listening to this. It helps us out a lot, and thank you for being here with me today. I love you. I love you so very much, and I appreciate you.
Always and forever. And I love and appreciate you too.
And if you guys haven't told someone you love that you love them today, what the fuck you waiting for?